Hi guys. So excited to be having this chat around the future of NA with all of you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and you guys all have really unique and interesting perspectives and roles within the bar industry, and I can't wait for sort of all of the things we're going to talk about. So to get started, I want to just have everybody introduce themselves, say who you are, what you do, kind of what the NA category means to you, or what your kind of involvement is, and we'll kick it off with Aaron.
Hey, my name's Aaron Polsky. I am the founder of a company called Livefire. It's a canned cocktail company. My involvement with NA heavily was sort of took a turn when I started working with Seedlip, which is where I met Laura. I think that the importance and significance of non-alcoholic offerings has grown sort of exponentially in the last few years, especially with such drinks as like Casamara. I believe it's called the NA like Amaro soda. And I think that it'll only continue to grow, and we'll only see more and more sort of like adult NA offerings that are complex and interesting and lower in sugar.
Awesome. All right, Camper, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Camper English. I'm a journalist, and I sort of track a lot of what's happening in the non-alcoholic space. But unbeknownst to a lot of people, I actually make hundreds and hundreds of non-alcoholic cocktails a year that with cocktail catering for corporate events, specifically with the tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we like to think of it as part of inclusivity programs for those companies. And so that has become a really crucial part of what I do, and a specialty that I have within that sort of cocktail catering space.
Awesome. All right. Now we're up to Josh.
Hello, my name is Josh Harris. I am the founder and owner of the Bon Vivants. We have bars called Trick Dog and Bon Voyage. And I've been sober for 16 years, and so my interest and whatever expertise I have in the non-alcoholic area is driven out of personal interest and my life choices. And so the perspective that I bring is pretty much driven by flavor and hospitality being two components that I feel like are not as present in non-alcoholic things as they are in alcoholic things. And lately, the hospitality and the flavor are raising to meet higher standards. That makes me happy. I'll probably talk about some of those things today.
Awesome. All right. I think we're now at Julia B.
Hi, I'm Julia Bainbridge. I'm a writer, and I have a cookbook of alcohol-free drink recipes called Good Drinks, coming out on October 6th. And the fantastic Miss Momos, Mr. Harris, and Mr. Polsky are all featured within. And there were also some conversations with Mr. English that were helpful to the development of the project, so thank you all. And the NA is important to me because I'd like to see all kinds of drinking, including not drinking, if you will, normalized. Like the quality of American spirits and beers and wines has risen over the past few decades, so it's only natural that NA drinkers are getting better options too. And so while I hope that in 5 years there won't be a need for this panel because drinks without alcohol will be baked into overall conversations about cocktails, I do think right now we have to emphasize non-alcs and kind of stay on this if drinking standards are to continue to be raised truly across the board. So, you know, this movement is far from mainstream. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad this is happening. And thank you for having me.
All right, Julia M.
So my name is Julia Momos. I am a bar owner in Chicago. My bar's name is Kumiko. A few years ago, I wrote a manifesto, if you will, on what we call these non-alcoholic drinks that are made for adults with less sugar, that we're hoping become more mainstream, to call them spirit-free. It's kind of moving away from the very negative terminology that was put around them, such as mocktail or even kiddie cocktail. It's just a lot of very odd names that have been prescribed to them. And I think Julia, he said it really beautifully, that, you know, my hope is that in this world of socializing over drinks, that whether there is alcohol or there is no alcohol in the drink, no matter what the EV is, if the same care is put into making that drink and into caring for the person who's ordering that drink. So yeah, I'm very excited for this conversation.
Nice. Lauren C., I think you're up.
Everyone, my name is Lauren Corriveau. I'm the former bar director of Nightcap in New York City. Now I'm based in LA and I work as lead developer for Proprietors LLC. Well, let's see. Selfishly, I have a lot of thoughts on non-alcoholic cocktails. But from a professional standpoint, what I've really come to know and understand is what we're really selling is the experience of being taken care of by a bartender and a server, you know, being out and about, and that our consumers are becoming smarter and more independent. And so what's really important, while cocktails are very important and artful, what's important is that we're able to reach many people with them, and being able to have more options in our toolkit, just as complex as a cocktail on a menu, is really important to broadening our scope, making more people feel comfortable and cared for in our spaces.
Awesome. Thank you. Lauren M.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here with all of you today. And I think there's quite a few of you that I don't know that I've ever met before. So it's really nice to meet you all, but your names and your reputations are very familiar. So I'm honored to be here with you. Yeah, so I'm Lauren Mote. I work for the global team for Diageo and for World Class. And I also own a modifier called Bittered Sling Bitters. And NA is very important to me in a lot of ways. As a bartender that has been working in the industry for 20 years, it's definitely the moderation conversation has been top of mind for me for a long time. Also, the way we activate celebrating drinks in the NA space or the no and low space has always been very important to me from the hospitality standpoint. How can we showcase a sense of place and you know, really celebrate the provenance of ingredients or things that happen regionally, or the terroir, if you want to call it, of different regions around the world, allowing bartenders a breadth of creativity without the natural fallback of, I'll take whiskey X or vodka Y, and then I will add things to that. So I think we're all on the same page here, that we want to change the, you know, the feeling of the obligatory drinking or feeling out of place, adding that inclusivity and that hospitality focus, but then also really addressing that each bartender has the power to create something that is flavor-led rather than ABV-led, and embed that into their beverage programs.
Awesome. All right, last but not least, Mark, you're up.
Hi, I'm Mark Goodwin. I'm one of the co-founders of the PIN Project. And just to jump right off of what Lauren just said, there's so much of like the magic of being a bartender and service and cocktails that has nothing to do with the alcohol in it. It has everything to do with the connection and the ingredients and everything wonderful you just said. I just hit my 2 years not drinking. So I have a lot of personal, thanks man. I have a lot of personal stake in the availability of, you know, safe space and also, you know, fun drinks and fun stuff. And just in case in point of how much this whole thing is growing, there's a little tiny cafe next to my house, one of the closest businesses, and they offered me a seedlip drink without me even asking about it the other day. And I was like, this is crazy. Here we are. But yeah, it's really awesome to be amongst all of you guys. Looked up to a lot of y'all for a long time. And yeah, you know, I was very lucky coming up with Trick Dog. I thought the NA program was like a normal thing. And that was a usual, every bar had that, and that is just not true. So it's cool to be amongst all of you leaders in the space, and of course, Laura.
Thanks, guys. I think you all kind of touched on this, but you know, having been a participant in watching a lot of the NA conversations that have happened across our industry for the last you know, a couple of years and also leading a couple of other discussions, I think we've all kind of seen a lot of the conversation around, is NA important, or is this trend here to stay? And I think like that is, you know, has been proven. You know, we're all here talking about all the reasons why this is important across the industry for all of these varied things, but also the amount of brands that have launched and the attention on the space in general is obviously prolonged. It feels to me very much an established, ongoing part of our industry. So I don't think we need to spend too much time, you know, figuring out if it's important. I think all of us agree that it is. I think it's really interesting to talk about, you know, what the world looks like moving forward. Obviously, things have changed a lot in the last 6 months, but even beyond that, like, you know, where do we want to see this go? How can we help in our various parts of the industry towards some of those goals you guys mentioned, like, you know, normalized beverage programs having, you know, great NA options and bartenders being inspired by flavor rather than ABV. Yeah, so that's kind of like the umbrella of what we're going to talk about. But I want to first kind of on that note, talk about what you guys, you know, mentioned around hospitality. And I think, you know, most, if not all of the people watching this panel will be some participant of the hospitality industry. And I know personally for me, that is the heart of what I love about this industry and what non-alcoholic drinks can offer to everybody who comes in the door. And so I wanted to just ask Josh if you would kind of kick off a little bit and talk about, you know, what the NA program at Trick Dog is all about, how you guys approach your thinking around it, and what you're hoping to accomplish when, you know, when people come, because you truly have one of what I would say is the most sort of thorough non-alcoholic programs in the US. I mean, everybody on this call, Julia too. But, you know, what are you guys doing at Trick Dog, and what are you kind of aiming for with your menus?
It's always been important for me that we put forward a non-alcoholic selection of things that has the same thought and care and attention that we put into the alcoholic things. We are a cocktail bar. We are a cocktail bar before we are other things at Trick Dog. So I'm not trying to hold ourselves out as saying that we're a non-alcoholic bar that has a few alcoholic cocktails or whatnot. At the end of the day, we sell alcoholic drinks more than anything else. But also, we don't sell that much wine, and we don't sell that much beer, and we don't sell that much of the other specialty sections of things with alcohol that we put on our menu. And we sell more non-alcoholic things than some of those other things. So ultimately what we're striving for is that when somebody takes our menu and looks through the different options of things that they can drink with us, that number one, they feel comfortable simply by the presence and description of all of the different things, choosing anything that they feel like they're drawn to, whether that be a beer, a cheap one, an expensive one, a wine by the glass, a fancy cocktail, a highball, a non-alcoholic, a soda, or anything, because of the fact that we've listed it and because of the way that we list it, not trying to minimize things, I guess. And, you know, around the hospitality of it, if, you know, let's just say that we strive to provide an exceptional experience. And so there's a lot of details that go into that. And thinking that we have missed a detail or an oversight of a detail has made somebody feel uncomfortable is something that I would try and avoid, because I have been in a position where I have felt uncomfortable because of this specific topic. And I also recognize that there's a myriad of other details, ones I've contemplated and not contemplated, that also could make people feel uncomfortable in any given business, right? So on this topic, of course, it's one that I understand. And I feel like were I to have been in positions when I was younger and navigating my sobriety at its infancy, that were I to have been in a place that was, and to use Camper's word, because I think it's fantastic to apply here and I haven't done so, to feel more inclusivity with being in that sort of space. that I wouldn't have to inquire, that I could navigate things and feel like whatever my experience was in life was being accepted simply by how things were laid out. So that's how I feel like the hospitality component plays into how things are listed.
Absolutely. I think on that note, Aaron, if you could touch on, I think one thing I've heard, and I think many of you might have heard, is like, oh, nobody comes to my, Josh, you mentioned Trick Dog's a cocktail bar, but obviously you have people who are coming in the door for other things. So one thing we kind of hear sometimes is, oh, nobody comes here that doesn't drink, or my bar is for people that drink. And Aaron, can you talk a little bit about, you ran a music venue that is also a sort of hard partying LA bar, but also sold a lot of non-alcoholic stuff. So can you just touch on what that element of inclusivity looks like in a space like Harvard and Stone?
Well, I plead the fifth on hard partying. But yeah, I think to speak in absolutes, nobody comes here that doesn't drink, right? You're always going to be wrong. Even though I just did that. So for me, it was important to offer, given that it was a music venue, we did have a lot of A&R people who sort of filled out their drinking dance card years ago and came there because it was their job and they had to watch the bands. But, you'd see a lot of Diet Coke or Red Bull or whatever. So, and then we had some employees who took breaks from drinking as well. So it kind of started when we were looking at NA options and found Old Milwaukee non-alcoholic, which fit our brand. It fit our brand as a bar as being old school heritage kind of branding. And also it was great in that the bar that was established by Old Milwaukee Regular was about here, and Old Milwaukee NA was also about here. So that was great. It lived up to everybody's expectations. And then, so initially when we did NA drinks, on the menu, or alcohol-free drinks, as I've come to call them, we would batch and then also make options for NA that we would make with the syrups. But it's true that very few people did order them. So then in later menus, we basically unbatched everything so that nothing would go bad in that sense. The same syrup that was used for the alcoholic drink was used for the alcohol-free drink. And people who noticed it liked it, whether or not they were consuming alcohol, right? So there were people who were drinking alcohol, alcohol-based drinks, but they'd see the asterisks, and on the bottom of the menu it denoted these are all available alcohol-free, and they really appreciated it as, we just want to make people feel seen, right? There are millions of ways that people are doing that in general, taking the burden off of the minority by acknowledging some sort of social aspect of life, right, as a majority. And so we kind of wanted to do that as well.
That's great. Thank you. I think that leads nicely into kind of what I want to queue up Mark to talk about, which is the idea of community. I think, all of us have realized over the last few months how important the idea of community is, and a space. We've missed being able to maybe be in community in a physical space with our friends and family. So kind of the bar as a concept, as what, Mark will talk about what a third space is, but, what can we do to create those spaces where we can have community? And, can the bar be that for everybody is something I kind of wanted to have you touch on, Mark.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I absolutely think it is. And I think really just those two key words we've already both been using, inclusivity and normalization, that's what we're going for. That is hospitality. It's demonstrating wonderful skills and wonderful flavors, and then, those things. And so I was doing a lot of research on, I read some stuff on symbolism and totems and some kind of cool stuff on that. But I read this kind of sociology book called The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg, and he was kind of the first writer of this phrase, the third space, or at least, you know, he gets credit for it. I'm sure he's not the first person to say that. But it was about, you know, like cafes and, you know, shops and, you know, meeting places, libraries, bookstores, all of these things, you know, which were really places for people to go and share ideas. And like, I mean, the bar world is one of the best industries at sharing ideas. You know, creators and writers and just like are all coming together all the time and exchanging information. And the bar is one of the really cool places where that still does happen. But that doesn't mean that alcohol has to be a component of that wonderful magic of, you know, sharing ideas. And in fact, it can be helpful, but it can also be really hurtful and can stop people from being able to have those connections and sharing of ideas. So once that kind of starts to happen, it's a good time to kind of take a look at it, you know, personally and also as an industry. And I think the industry has done a really, really, really wonderful job, I think. And I've noticed, I've only been in the industry for, you know, about 10 years or so, but what I've seen in that 10 years is pretty substantial. And there's pretty much no place I can't go where I don't feel very welcome. And that's just incredible. It's really cool. But yeah, that third space concept, it's about exchanging ideas and human connection, and alcohol can definitely be a lubricant, but it's certainly not a necessity in that equation. I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it did. Cool.
Totally. I think that also kind of leads us into talking about sort of the connections being, you know, alcohol maybe not being the only thing that's bringing us together, and rather the space and, you know, our shared human experience is at play too. And there's a lot of research, and I know Julia, you probably know Julia B. You might know all about this and can share a little bit, but there's a lot of research saying that we are lonely as a society, especially, you know, in the US and the UK. There's lots of sort of studies done around loneliness, and, you know, can we use the third space, the bar, or, you know, a hopefully futuristic, very inclusive third space to actually combat loneliness? Is that something that like would work? You know, and what is the sort of role that NA could play in that, in making it, you know, a space for connection for anybody or everybody? I know that was kind of a vague question, but does anyone want, Julia, do you have anything you want to touch on there?
I mean, the loneliness piece is like a whole other panel. I mean, I definitely think there's some overlap, but like as somebody who, moonlights as sort of a student of loneliness, I could geek out on that. I kind of want to linger on the last piece for a moment, if you don't mind. Like I get into this conversation a lot, into this debate a lot. So I'd love to hear more people's perspective on this third space thing. Like a friend of mine who owns bars and who, interestingly enough, takes big chunks of time away from alcohol, really believes that the bar is the standing bastion for the drinker. You know, by that he means like operators shouldn't deny service to sober patrons, but they shouldn't necessarily be obligated to accommodate those people's expectations. And it's an interesting idea, you know, that the bar should be able to live with its own set of rules, and as he put it, to kind of stick its flag in the ground and say, we are booze, we are about booze. But bars are our third spaces, you know. I guess like the next step in this argument for me, again, because I have this conversation a lot, used to be, well, you know, why agitate for bars to welcome non-drinkers? And I'm speaking as a non-drinker here, you know, but like, why not think about other ways in which we can gather? There are so many other activities. Why ask the bar to be something it's not? And then I go, you know, but we are heavily socialized in the US for drinking to be the primary social activity. And I think it's a good one. It's one that, as opposed to going to a museum or playing soccer or, you know, some other activity that you use to bring yourselves together, encourages conversation without much distraction, right? So as long as it's the case that bars are our third spaces, yes, I would tend to admire the operators who choose to make their establishments welcome to all. And that's where I'm going to spend my money. But I wonder what other people say about this, bars being about booze, and maybe not necessarily having to be inclusive if bars are by definition about drinking.
Well, also bars used to not carry a vodka and then tell you that you were stupid if you ordered a vodka. And nobody's really doing that anymore. And so I feel like this is another example of people that stood up on that pedestal, getting down off it and evolving. I think there's been a tremendous amount of progress from what I've seen. And of course, everybody tries to find the way that that fits for them. But I think generally speaking, the world is more accepting of people's choices around not drinking alcohol. And I'm seeing that confirmed by what I view on menus and the way that people talk about it in those spaces.
Aaron, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even if ideologically you do believe as a bar operator that like bars are the drinker's bastion and like they should serve alcohol or whatever, I think also as a bar operator, you're leaving money on the table if you're not offering like NA beer at the very least. So, you know, it's basically one of these things where it's like if you Souther Teague has this thing where if like 5 people are trying to decide a movie that they want to see and 4 of them decide on like Star Wars and one of them like doesn't really like Star Wars but wants to hang out, they go and see Star Wars. I mean, it's kind of the same, right? The non-drinker is going to go with those 4 drinkers to a bar. Why not make money off of them if like for some reason you're absolutely against making them feel included?
Julia M., do you have anything you want to add on this topic in terms of just how you've approached your bar program and what your reaction to sort of like that sentiment might be?
Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting perspective to hold steadfast to what bars have been, which are gathering places where people drink alcohol for a really long time. I think what's important for us as bartenders, as business owners, as people with money to spend at establishments to determine what our reason for being is. Why are we going to a bar? Why are we opening a bar? Why do we have a bar? And for some, it's to serve drinks, to serve alcoholic drinks, to serve cocktails. And that's cool and that's amazing. But then for others, it's to serve people. And so if your focus is to serve people, then that idea of inclusivity truly does come into play. And that's in all aspects, even beyond alcohol, non-alcoholic, when it comes to food, whether it's, dietary restrictions or unique diets that people are following. Someone comes into a bar and says, I'm not doing any refined sugars. What do you do? Do you hold fast and say, no, this cocktail will not taste how I intended it to taste if it doesn't have any sugar in it? And then do you lose a customer? Do you leave that money on the table, as Aaron said, or do you adapt and create something that you wouldn't typically do? So I think it comes down to being flexible, but then also looking towards the future and to the point where you don't have to be flexible, where it's seamless, where it's natural, where every single possible request has been thought of in advance, and there is something to meet that request or meet that need. And so if a bar owner is choosing to be, cocktails only, alcohol only, then it had better be the best cocktails around, and it can be celebrated for that, in a sense, where that is where people go for some of the best cocktails, period. But then I think a lot of people are going to start to want to go to those places where everyone can feel welcome and everyone feels like there's something for them, and where the Band-Aid effect doesn't come into play, where they create some kind of makeshift fits after potentially like causing harm, in a sense, by not having something ready for everyone. So yeah, that's I think it's very personal for a lot of people, like our business, as a business owner, Corriveau, like this is my baby, and everything that we do, I want people to feel the essence of the space, and I don't want to compromise. But there are a lot of people out there who have very reasonable requests and are often just it used to be made fun of the vodka drinkers, to Josh's point, I thought that was a really interesting comparison to bring up, but it's very true. And I think as we move forward, it's going to become the norm at bars to be able to get really amazing drinks and that are non-alcoholic. And so if people don't begin to prepare for that, then they may see their customer base dwindling and becoming smaller and smaller.
Yeah, Laura, I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to linger there for a moment because I think like we all agree, right? Like we're coming from the same place that we think that bars should serve non-drinkers as well. But like, I think there are a lot of people who don't, and it's worth kind of having that debate publicly in front of others. Like I don't want to miss, this opportunity to bring non-drinkers into the fold of how we socialize in like a real way. And I think you have only to look at the jokes and some of the nastier comments on some of the pieces I've written on this topic to see that the stigma is still very much alive among consumers and also bartenders.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I run into that, with Seedlip pretty frequently. And I think that I'm going to toss it to Lauren Mote because I was going to do that anyway. But I just want to say really quickly, like, maybe all of us who've worked in bars and restaurants for years can recall like a chef who wouldn't modify like any kind of dish for any vegetarian, or, a coffee shop where they would absolutely not use an alternative milk because that's not what they did. And I think those attitudes have dwindled. So I can only assume, that the same will be true for this. But it is definitely alive and well as an opinion. So Lauren, you put your thumb up first and then we'll go to Josh.
So many thumbs, so many opinions. Yeah, I love talking about the conviviality aspect of people coming together. And I think very strongly on it as well, because there are, even though I work for the largest liquor company in the world, I mean, I would say more often than not, I'm drinking, something very low in alcohol or drinking something 0 proof or completely non-alcoholic because I'm really interested in the creativity. And to be honest, this actually brings up another point that I almost just outed myself, that I don't think it's anyone's business either, why I'm choosing to order the way that I'm ordering. And part of, the stigma that I feel and I've seen when being in bars, and you're either with somebody that is choosing not to drink for some reason, it is their choice, or it's, for me, I think it's really important that we are acknowledging that these people, all of us are in the space together, and whatever we choose to drink and whatever the offering is, we are completely judging that establishment and the team based on that inclusion in the moment. So on the micro side, for an individual city or town or neighborhood, and it's not just the US, it's outside the US, and I can give a bit of a glimpse on a global perspective on this too. But, I would really focus on my neighborhood bar here in Amsterdam. Can I walk around the corner and go to my local watering hole and be able to sit there and drink what I want to drink in the moment? And if they're choosing not to serve something that interests me or something that doesn't fit with the lifestyle that I'm choosing to be in that moment, how many other people does that alienate? And do we have other places that we can support in the neighborhood that are more aligned to our values and what we're hoping to get out of this industry? I think we as consumers have a lot of choices when it comes to this. We can choose to support places based on how they can offer things that support our lifestyles, and we can also choose not to support them. And that's the loudest way that we can make that action heard. And then on the larger scale, that conviviality transfers. I mean, there are bars in Ireland, as an example, the Virgin Mary in Dublin, Ireland, when Anna Walsh, when she opened that place with the owners, and I walked in for the first time and I couldn't believe it. She was making these beautiful cocktails that are visually and from a flavor perspective, they're inspired by some of our favorite drinks that we as bartenders have always been connected to, like a pint of Guinness or something else. And they're really just masterful in how they're put together. And I said, so what types of consumers come in here? Do you find that there are people that are just looking for something non-alcoholic? And she said, to be honest, we get more bartenders in here than anybody else. So bartenders have been also, us as a community, a global community, have been looking for a way to even participate as the consumer in this. And and we're starting to see that all over the world. And we've been doing the same sorts of programs in Brazil. There's been a huge focus on, drink positive campaigns and moderation, because we have to start the conversation at the very minimum of talking about why it's important that bartenders are part of that conversation, not just curating, but also participating in being a consumer at that table, and what it means for everybody else. Because oftentimes we do what the bartender does and consumers follow that same thing. Bartenders are the ones that are helping to create and put longevity into these trends, and they shouldn't be trends. They are just lifestyle changes that all of us are just part of. I don't remember what the question was, but I think I
that's
got
great.
There in
You
the
did
end.
it. Nailed it. Josh put his thumb up, so I'll go to Josh to follow up on that.
Laura, the point that you brought up in comparison to making food modifications, I think in that example, what I started thinking was it's about destigmatizing people's life choices and doing it in a passive way, right? So what I advocate for in a non-alcoholic comparison is not just that you walk into a space and then say, what can you make without alcohol, and then have to have this huge discourse about what it is and what it's going to taste like. The same way that I'd be looking at a food menu and were I to be somebody who didn't eat meat or had an aversion to something or whatnot, have to engage in an aversion. It's like, my hope is that you can look at the menu and through the menu, have it demonstrated to you that you should have a confidence engaging in a normal conversation on the attributes of different things, and not that you will be unfairly or unnecessarily singled out for the life choices that you've made. It just becomes about the ordering and whatnot. So that's part of why I think it's so important that things are listed on the menu, with the only exception being that if you're a place that doesn't have a menu at all and your entire shtick is that we go off the cuff, then I think that's, then you would lead with that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think people underestimate the power that, opening a menu and seeing something that applies to you, like the confidence that gives you as a consumer, I think is underestimated. And I Mark and Julia, I saw your thumbs, but I want to just really quickly have Camper weigh in on how that works in the event space, because I think it's really applicable, especially, the stuff you do with the tech industry. What have you seen in reaction to all the non-alcoholic offerings, options you're bringing to the table, which people probably aren't expecting or didn't even know they would have the choice for?
Yeah, for sure. We, as others have touched on, we try to take care of it in advance. So you would expect going to a conference that there should be some gluten-free options on the buffet or a vegetarian option. People still aren't really expecting it from the cocktail bar quite yet. However, they're getting it. People might go to, we've developed systems to try to take care of a lot of this stuff in advance. The wine service is separate with the sodas, but we put a sign over there saying non-alcoholic cocktails available at the bar, the cocktail bar, to let people know that they'll find something for them there that they might not have expected, and people love it. So the two things that we look at with these programs are, one, it's corporate responsibility. A lot of business comes from corporate cocktail catering and stuff like that these days. And it allows for a no drinking pressure environment to have non-alcoholic cocktails. And it cuts liability for, say, sexual harassment or stuff that might be exacerbated in a heavy drinking or a forceful drinking environment. We're trying to get rid of that, like, oh, I had to, and therefore they'll sue the client. And as mentioned before, inclusivity, that there's something for everybody, and it's an equal experience to what the non-drinkers drinkers and non-drinkers are getting. So with the cocktails, pretty much one of every 3 drinks is going to be non-alcoholic. And something that we've come to agree on with the clients is that the non-alcoholic drink it's going to be equal quality, carved ice with a logo on it and garnishes and all of that. However, also, we typically try to make it look like one of the drinks with alcohol, so that no one needs to know who's drinking and who's not drinking or why that might be. which is why I love the subtitle of Julia's book, which is something like, for whatever reason. You want to, for people who aren't drinking for whatever reason. So there's sort of like some incognito mojo that we do there at the bar, and it's become, we've become well known for that, and people are like thrilled, ecstatic at the experience of being able to get the same thing for the first time that they've ever had, and to dazzle at the ice and not just have a soda and all of that. And I hope that that translates a little bit more than it has in the past to the average cocktail bar as well. It's not like oh, we can do this one thing, but there are a range of options, for example. And as people do online events in 2020, because people aren't meeting in person, that is something we're also going to have to look at and have real emphasis for the teams that I work with, because the non-alcoholic options are so important. I haven't done too much online training yet because I need I need to have a non-alcoholic option that doesn't alter the experience and doesn't make it weird for anyone who's not drinking at the same time. I'd rather have it be an all non-alcoholic cocktail class than have it be like, and for, you know, Dave over there who's not drinking, you can do this. Like, and so I don't want that to be part of what I do. I want everyone to be equally delighted.
Awesome. I think that the singling out is something I think that we can all agree is a really problematic part of it. And I think that you're doing some really, really cool things within the event space to address that. Mark, you put your thumb up. You want to jump in?
Yeah, just one of the things we talk about so much is there's no black and white, and you know, with the PIN project, and everything is a spectrum. And I think the comfort spectrum of someone saying like I feel often sometimes I'm trying to make the person serving me the drink feel comfortable, and sometimes I'm trying to make myself feel comfortable. And it's kind of strange. Some people get really weirded out when you say you're not drinking, and it becomes this reflection on them. And there's a whole lot of psychoanalysis, I'm sure, that can be done there. But it can be really hard to say no, full stop. And it can be really hard to string days together. So whenever there is a choice of if you can have an option or not, that can sort of ease people into that and get rid of that singling out sort of experience. Like what Camper was just saying, obviously there's like, sure, liability reasons, but you know, the heart of that, the soul of that is like giving people an option to be the person that they want to be, you know.
Amazing. Julia, thumbs up. You're up.
Yes. First of all, my computer was resting on my book, so I had to move it for a second. Camera, that's why I didn't answer. Yeah, I know. The subtitle is sort of Dr. Seussian long, so I have to reference it sometimes to even remember my own book subtitle, which is Alcohol-Free Recipes for When You're Not Drinking for Whatever Reason. But I want to go back to the menu placement piece, which I actually wrote a story about this very thing. I spoke to someone who runs a visual communications agency, and she spoke to the influence that bars can really have here in shifting the paradigm. So she said, you know, a menu can be incredibly psychological. Like, how important do you feel considering what you're associating with on the menu? And if you're associating with a thing that's discarded and not celebrated, you know, that's like at the back and the bottom of the menu, then that's how you feel. So I really appreciate Josh and, you know, other people who are sort of moving the non-alcs into sort of front and center along with the other drinks. And I guess, Laura, I never really answered your question about the loneliness piece, but what I will say is, you know, this is very much the point of my book, and not to spend too much time plugging it, but like it exists to, one, shine a light on the people in the industry who have been at the forefront of this space and have been working to be hospitable to all kinds of drinkers, and two, to show consumers who don't drink alcohol how many delicious beverages there are finally for them. And that's why these drinks are presented in the book. You know, the look of the book was really important to me too, for this reason. So the way they're styled, they're photographed, the way the book is designed, it's elegant, it's grown up, it's glam, and this has historically been kind of an unsexy category. So I see this as kind of a coming out party for an audience of people who haven't felt a part of the party before. And similarly, the bar has the power to help shift this paradigm, you know, as well.
Amazing. I think that's a nice kind of leeway, just talking about the menu and the place that it fits within the bar. I know we started with that, talking about Trick Dog, but Lauren, I know you're passionate about this. Lauren C., you're passionate about this topic. So can you just weigh in a little bit on like kind of, you know, what your experience with that has been and where you think it should go, or what are we working towards in our bar programs that would take us into this like ideal future of what this might look like in a place like Nightcap or in a proprietor's bar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, the idea builds on what everyone is already saying, right? It's about making people feel comfortable. I am a vegetarian with dietary restrictions, and I often feel incredibly uncomfortable in situations that I don't want to draw attention to myself or be the difficult one. I want to have a normal dining experience just like anyone else that I'm joined with. And I think that, you know, having those options front and center on a menu really does normalize that interaction. You're able to order an NA drink just the same way any other cocktail would be ordered. You don't have to have this awkward push and pull with a bartender, or, you know, getting their attention and then they seem busy and then you don't want to seem difficult. You know, you don't have to specifically ask, can you do this cocktail non-alcoholic? And then they have to explain to you why they can't. Or, you know, asking about a soft drink, and then someone you're with, maybe it's a first date, and then it's like, oh, you're not drinking. And then, you know, maybe you have to come out with that before and have that conversation before you had other conversations that you wanted to prioritize. So yeah, again, normalizing this experience of just ordering and being and feeling comfortable in the space is so important. And, you know, working with proprietors, we develop hundreds of menus a year, and we have this conversation a lot because we obviously try to mix things up and express things in different ways depending on the concept. But for me, you know, as a vegetarian, as someone who does not want to consume specific things for a multitude of reasons, I don't want to have to skim through a cocktail menu to see like if I'm going to be safe, or, you know, sort of like read the asterisks. Is this going to be, you know, like follow it, you know, I don't want to have a difficult journey of figuring out of translating a menu or having to have a long conversation with a server or a bartender. I want to know exactly where my place is. So for that reason, I really love the very strict non-alcoholic section. Again, I just think it makes people feel so cared for and seen and respected in a way that we should all be striving for.
That's a really interesting and I think thoughtful take on it. We debate a lot at Seedlip about what the goal of the future menu looks like. Should it be a totally inclusive experience where one cocktail is non-alcoholic, one's alcohol? You know, is that where we're going, and is that a good place to strive for? Maybe. I'd be interested to see what you guys. We've got about 10 minutes left, so this is a perfect transition into the part where we talk about where we're headed and what some of the pitfalls are. I think that if you have some thoughts on menu inclusivity and sectioning, that would be great to touch on if anybody wants to do that. I think we're not there yet, and so people don't even know to expect that. So if you weave it in so seamlessly with the rest of your drinks, you might just miss people altogether because they don't even have that expectation. Even though I would personally like to see that become the norm, you know, down the road. But I think you're absolutely right. But yes, the other thing I want to just ask about is like, what have you guys done wrong? I don't want to say done wrong, but like, Josh, we talked once about like a fermented situation that somebody had called out and been like, hey, I actually feel uncomfortable with this. Like, what do you guys think some of the watch outs are in this conversation and category? And then, you know, yeah, all that jazz. So Josh, you put your thumb up, right?
Yeah.
So
that's actually a great point to illustrate one of the two things I was going to bring up. First is about naming. I believe that it's important to name non-alcoholic drinks in a similar fashion to the way that you would name other drinks on your menu, you know, if you're picking song names or, you know, whatever it is. And the reason why I think that that's important is because it takes it all the way in normalizing the interaction with the server or the bartender. I wouldn't want to put somebody in a position where they came up and they said, I'll have, you know, a grandma's sweater and a vintage photo and non-alcoholic mint limeade. right? It would be great if that was also like, and you know, a color of something. And in the case of the hospitality component, I think that it's essential that everybody who's working on the floor or behind the bar in a course of service has an understanding of this component of offerings and service and is able to speak about them comfortably, to the same degree that you would expect them to know the attributes of spirits, you know, how many times something is distilled and what kind of wood it's aged in, and be able to speak about those things with a guest if that's the type of establishment that you are. And so in the case of your example, Laura, at Bon Voyage, we made a soda that was fermented. So it was, you know, lightly alcoholic, but lightly alcoholic, like, you know, in the way that a kombucha would be. And we did list that on the menu. And we also went like into great detail with it, with our staff, and made it a point that this was always brought up to people. And the reason why we were using that soda was because we also made that soda for an alcoholic version of the drink where we were sort of mimicking the flavors together. And ultimately it became too much of a dynamic to manage in the course of service in a busy bar, and that the like the potential for an oversight where that might affect somebody in a negative way or in an unintended way wasn't worth the, you know, sort of like just making another ingredient and making a different drink.
Awesome. Yeah, I think being, you know, educated staff who can really speak to the consumers is so important. Camper, you put your thumb up. You tag in.
Yeah, on that note, and also with a topic Julie Bainbridge and I had discussed is bitters, and the conversation around, is 2 dashes of alcohol and bitters in your drink okay? I had tried to do that initially, and what I learned was that conversation is too difficult, too challenging. It actually forces people to say, yes, serve me alcohol when they're not drinking, and even though they're not going to feel it. So new policy is it's not an option. There's no bitters option for non-alcoholic drinks, and I've recommended that to several people.
Yeah, I think that Lauren, Mote, and I just discussed this a couple of days ago, so I'll tag you in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important that we're using the right language when we discuss drinks. Otherwise, it feels misleading completely. And I think if, you know, we wanted drinks to be part of a non-alcoholic world, then the bitters themselves would be non-alcoholic. And that's where I think other brands that are, you know, not made with alcohol have really been able to help make that conversation. But, you know, I think when we're talking about 0 proof, mid proof, low proof, standard proof, I think country to country, it also varies. And so what works in one country at 0.5% alcohol as part of a way to describe what this is, whether it's a kombucha, a non-alcoholic beer, or something else that has a trace of alcohol in it, it still misleads the guest, because again, it's none of our business why people are choosing not to drink alcohol, but it is our business in order to provide options and safe options that people can choose things and trust us as the bartenders to give them exactly what they've asked for.
Yeah, I think, Camper, your point about you're basically asking someone to tell you it's okay to serve them alcohol, no matter what the amount. You're asking for that conscious choice to be made, and I think that's a pretty significant one for a lot of people. And you know, why, after everything we've just talked about and making them feel comfortable and safe and options and all these things, why would you then want to put somebody in that spot? And I think I have transitioning into, I know Lauren and Mark, you put your thumbs up. We've got about 5 minutes. You guys definitely follow up on that. But I also want to transition into like what would good look like 5, 10, 20 years from now? What are we missing in the space? I think non-alcoholic bitters is a great one. I know that in the global markets there are some, but in the US we don't have a lot of options. But just it could be products, it could be third spaces, anything that you think that you'd really like to see this in this futuristic utopia that we're working towards. Mark, you go first on your follow-up.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to very quickly say, when we did the first meeting for the PIN project, it's, you know, the whole idea is it's just a social construct. It's just a piece of metal. You know, it doesn't have any special powers outside of the community. Someone brought up, you know, as a bartender, when you're working and you have the PIN on, do you straw taste or do you not? Is that breaking the rules? And actually, Josh Harris, we did it in his spot, and he came up and we were talking about this, and he's like, I think it should be a personal choice, and it should be about that bartender making that choice. You wouldn't straw taste a drink that you were allergic to. So why would you straw taste something that was going to put you in a compromising situation? When the role is reversed and it's us serving, guests and taking care of people, we have to give them the tools and the complete transparency to put themselves in the best position and take care of themselves. So it's all about giving them not just the options, but also the education and all that other stuff, the transparency to know to make the correct choice for themselves. So like labeling and all that stuff it's exceptionally important, because again, those slopes can be very slippery really quickly. But anyway, Lauren, sorry.
Nice.
No worries. Just two things that I think are an important part of the conversation about maybe where we've done things wrong in the past and where they can improve. For me, one thing is pricing. So previously I had really stuck to, the foundation of I'm pricing my cocktail based on the ingredients, and, it's maybe not valued in the same way because, 2 ounces of this spirit obviously costs more. And a perfect example of someone who's done this right would be existing conditions in New York City. May it come back to us someday. They treated their non-alcoholic cocktails just like they did any of their other cocktails, and through their technology and ingredient use, drove up the value of that cocktail so that they could be on the same level. Cost and value analysis for our guests is a real thing that we have to consider. We don't want anyone to think that, well, this is $4 less than this cocktail, so it's not going to be as good. We need to really be mindful of how we're creating value within our non-alcoholic cocktails. One way I've sort of tried to attempt that in a very small bar with not a lot of prep abilities is creating highly edible and unique garnishes just to drive up that Instagram factor and the interaction factor with your cocktail. That's one thing. And then another problem, just to quickly discuss, is we are seeing a lot of new NA products come out on the market, but they're being marketed like alcohol, but not distributed through those vendors. And they also don't have, they're not being engaged with bars in the same way. So Seedlip really is the only brand that I know of that has reps, right, that are engaged with bartenders, are creating wellness programs, are doing educational seminars in the same way that a liquor rep might, right? But otherwise, delivery of these other items are really difficult to get your hands on. I'm traveling around the world constantly making menus, always trying to put non-alcoholic cocktails on the menus and not knowing what I can get my hands on. And it is so difficult to find that out. So something that I would really love to see is sort of that interaction happen more so from those brands into the bar world and less just aimed at the home consumer.
Awesome. I think that's hugely important. And I think that, as demand grows, distribution and all of that for those products will hopefully follow suit. Julia, and then Lauren's going to take us home because we're almost done. So Julia, you're up.
Okay, to be fair, a lot of those brands are super indie and don't have the resources to have all the people that Seedlip now does, but totally hear you. Dram and El Guapo are completely non-alcoholic bitters that are on the market. Josh, I totally agree about the naming thing, like giving non-alcoholic drinks a name. One, for the interaction with the consumer, but also like on your guys' end, like you've put work into developing that drink. Give it a hat, And sorry, I'm just giving my wrap-up statements because I know we're going down. I guess the last thing, if we're pressing on people to do better for my industry, meaning the press, I think it's on us to ask about non-alcoholic programs. I think this is part of how we should be evaluating restaurants moving forward. And I'd like to see critics underscoring good non-alcoholic beverage options and possibly even knocking the venues that don't do this.
Awesome. All right, Lauren, Mote.
So many amazing points on here, and a lot of it, I guess, from the perspective of, say, world class and also working on the Seedlip brand as well. It's been amazing to really listen to bartenders and listen to how people in general are focused on different aspects of mindful drinking and how we can bring more people into the NA category and the low category and beyond, because there is something for everyone. And granted, we are talking about NA today, and it's helped to inform a lot of the educational topics that we teach on a broader scale in a global level. And we understand that, you know, and for me especially, that, you know, CLIP is not available in all markets, and there has to be other education and other points that we can educate on and educate global bartenders across, you know, every country and every city, and make the education available and accessible so that each of these bartenders can really champion the exciting creative moments that they have, whether it's naming, creating a story, it's highlighting a local beekeeper or another community project. I feel like when you wrap your head around, you know, NA or mindful drinking and moderation in general, it opens up your brain to other possibilities where we should be focusing. Because what good is, you know, doing an NA cocktail that really means something to you if you're still maybe using other ingredients that are pulling it down in a bad way, perhaps, you know, white refined sugar or other products that are not sustainable. Or so I feel like it's part of a bigger conversation that we can really educate bartenders on globally. And everything that each of you have said here today has definitely given me so many more things to think about, and will give everybody so much to think about that's tuning in, an ever growing conversation of where we can go from here.
Thanks, guys. I think that is a perfect place to end, but I also just want to say, you know, in the chat box, Josh threw up a little thing about dynamic flavor. And I think that is a frontier of the flavor frontier is the exciting place. I think that these drinks live, and that is the inspiration for bartenders, for bar owners, and all of these things to really like push us. Once you take away that traditional formula or that traditional spirit, you know, where you get your inspiration from and how do you weave the flavors together becomes like a whole wide world. Julia Momos, you've done some of the most incredible sort of like flavor flipping and combinations and textures. And I think I'm super excited to see, you know, the work that all of you guys have done, all these things we talked about kind of roll on into the future. So I will wrap us up there. Thank you guys so much. I could talk about all this stuff for like 3 more hours, but you're all the best. And thank you for this very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, a real honor.